So, here's a puzzle for you. You've got a man who's celebrated all over the world as a genius innovator. But back home, he's been detained, called a threat to national security. How does that even happen? How does someone like that end up in jail? Well, today, we're going to try and make sense of the two very different worlds of Sonam Wangchuk.
And this right here is the central puzzle. On the one hand, he's a Ramon Magsaysay Award winner. That's basically Asia's Nobel Prize, praised for his incredible climate solutions. And on the other hand, he's locked up under India's very strict National Security Act, accused of being a threat to the public. I mean, these two things just don't seem to fit together at all.
You know, his wife, Gitanjali Ongmo, really put her finger on it with this question. It cuts right to the chase, doesn't it? What does it say when one of your nation's most celebrated problem solvers ends up behind bars?
Okay, a quick but really important point of clarification here. The Sonam Wangchuk we're talking about today is the innovator, the activist. He is not Colonel Sonam Wangchuk, the highly decorated hero from the Kargil War. It's an easy mix-up since they're both famous figures from the same region, but our focus is squarely on the innovator. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at his situation right now. Then, we'll dive into his amazing innovations. After that, we'll explore the protest that landed him in trouble, look at both sides of the story, and finally, unpack what this all means for the bigger picture in Ladakh.
All right, let's start with the here and now. Sonam Wangchuk in jail. And not just any jail. He's being held under one of the country's toughest laws.
But to really get why his arrest is such a shock to so many people, we need to rewind a bit. We need to look at who he was before he became the symbol of protest. Let's meet the Architect of Adaptation.
His journey as a real change maker kicks off way back in 1988. He co-founded this group called SECMOL, and its mission was huge, to completely fix an education system that was, to put it mildly, just not working for the kids in this unique high-altitude world.
And when I say not working, I mean it was a disaster. Get this, before he stepped in, a staggering 95% of students in Ladakh were failing their big 10th grade exams. 95%! The whole system was broken. Kids were being forced to learn in languages they didn't speak, about things that had zero to do with their actual lives.
But then came Operation New Hope, this big reform program he led. And the results? A complete 180. By 2015, that 95% failure rate had flipped to a 75% success rate. This wasn't just a little tweak, it was a full-blown educational revolution.
But he didn't stop with schools. He turned his incredible mind to an even bigger problem for Ladakh. See, it's a cold desert, so water is everything. And his solution? An invention that made him famous around the globe, the Ice Stupa. It's a beautifully simple, totally brilliant way to create artificial glaciers.
The science is just genius. In the dead of winter, a pipe carries freezing river water downhill. Simple gravity creates all the pressure you need to push that water up another vertical pipe, like a fountain. It sprays out into the freezing air and instantly turns to ice, falling down and building this massive cone of ice, a stupa. Then that ice cone just sits there, like a giant water battery, and melts slowly in the spring, releasing water right when the farmers need it for their crops. So simple, so effective.
And believe me, the world noticed. In 2016, he won the super prestigious Rolex Award. Then just 2 years later, he got the Ramon Magsaysay Award. We're not talking about small-time recognition here. These awards put him on the map as a truly world-class innovator.
So somewhere along the way, Sonam Wangchuk, the innovator, became Sonam Wangchuk, the activist. And as we're about to see, that activism, it came with a really, really high price.
He ended up becoming the face of a movement that had some very specific demands for Ladakh. They wanted full statehood so they could have their own elected government. They wanted to be included in the 6th schedule of the Constitution. That's a special protection that gives tribal areas a lot of power to protect their own land and culture. And they wanted job reservations for young people who are really struggling to find work.
And then, in September of 2025, things just exploded. On the 10th, Wangchuk started a hunger strike to get everyone's attention. About 2 weeks later, on the 24th, a protest in the city of Leh turned violent. It was tragic. 4 people were killed. And just 2 days after that, authorities detained Wangchuk.
Okay, so this brings us to the messiest part of the whole thing, the official story versus his side of the story. There are two completely different narratives about what happened and why he was really arrested.
Now, to understand this, you have to understand the law they used against him. The National Security Act, or NSA, is a preventative detention law.
What that means is the government can basically lock someone up for a whole year without a charge, without a trial, just because they suspect that person might do something against national security. It's a very powerful tool.
So here are the two sides. The government's case is that he stirred up violence with provocative speeches, even mentioning things like the Arab Spring. They also say he has some shady foreign connections and financial issues. But his defenders have a completely different take. They say look at his history. It's all about nonviolence, and he even condemned the violence online. They argue the foreign money was just for legitimate research, and a trip to Pakistan was for a UN climate event. For them, this isn't about national security at all. It's a calculated move to silence him and make him the fall guy.
So let's just zoom out for a second, because this is bigger than just one man. His case really shines a spotlight on what we can call the Ladakh question. And here's why that question is so complicated and so important. First, you have this incredibly unique culture. Over 97% of the people there are tribal. Second, the environment is extremely fragile. It's a high-altitude desert that's getting hit hard by climate change. And third, you can't ignore its location. It's right on the border with both China and Pakistan, which means stability there is a huge national security issue. So you've got this delicate mix of culture, ecology, and geopolitics all clashing.
Which brings us to this final big question. When a person who is famous for creating solutions becomes a symbol of political dissent, what does that really tell us? What does it reveal about the future of a place like Ladakh, a region that's caught in this tough spot between trying to protect its own identity and serving the strategic interests of a nation? And honestly, there are no easy answers to that.